remember the end of that season, I worked all summer. And then my wife, Bonnie, and I took this 3-month road trip. And I came home to no job, very little snowboard money, and no money in the bank. And I checked my mail after 3 months of being away, and there was a check for like, I don't know, $5,000.
Welcome to Going Off, a podcast about snowboard history.
As the early days of snowboard culture slide into the past, we're documenting its oral history.
We're tracing back what made it so strange and explosive, why it changed all those lives and still bonds people for life.
From the history of snowboard fashion to how halfpipes were born.
From the birth of jibbing to movies, music, and magazines.
Each episode drops in on something new. I'm one of your hosts, Tricia Burns.
And I'm your other host, Jennifer Shurowski. We've traveled the world together for decades, riding and just living the way of life we call snowboarding. And now we're ready to get in the Wayback Machine. I think we're recording now.
Let's fucking go off.
Oh man, I don't know what's going on. All right. Hey everyone, Jen here. Before we dive into our Behind the Juicy Fruit Gum commercial episode, we just wanted to quickly do an intro to the intro with a little correction because we got some late incoming intel that one of our factoids was actually a myth, like an urban legend. So we wanted to sort of set the record straight so we're not perpetuating a tall tale. Tricia,
even though the internet did say that it was true. We were claiming, and it looks very much like a David Hasselhoff, but it is actually Gordy Johnson, who just happens to be a lookalike for David Hasselhoff. All the B-roll content was filmed in Mammoth, and so he was a local there. But then he went on to work in the snowboarding and ski scene. He was a rep for Rossi Snowboards when I actually rode for Rossi back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And then if you've been to a Grand Prix or US Open, I think he did some X Games and maybe some Olympics, but he was like a live to crowd announcer in the early 2000s. And so Gordy's been in the scene forever. And so was really funny. I was talking to a friend and he was like, "Do you know who that is?" I'm like, "Yeah, David Hasselhoff." He's like, "No, that's Gordy." I'm like, "Gordy Johnson?" So
this is the guy that sniffs the gum.
Yeah.
If you're wondering, in the commercial. And, we just thought it was Hasselhoff because it looks exactly like him and because that's what the internet says, but just wanted to set the record straight. Kit from Knight Rider was actually not in the spot.
And we've got a couple other little tidbits about the Juicy Fruit commercial that we learned after we recorded this that we'll share in a variety show coming soon to your ears.
Yeah. And also, one more late-breaking bit of news. We finally got a Patreon up and running because we were literally the only podcast in existence without one. And you girls aren't totally opposed to getting paid,
We're taking donations. So if you want to support us, we would love that. And you can find the link in our bio.
Yeah, it's patreon.com/going off. And yeah, on to the show. Trish, are you chewing gum today?
I forgot to get my super soft juicy fruit out so it could bend into my mouth just so perfectly.
Is gum as big as it was in the 80s?
It can't be. I mean, there's so many ads for different gum brands back then. I mean, gum was I chewed a lot of gum in the 80s.
I chewed a lot of gum too. And I remember because teachers always got pissed at us. I remember no gum in school, but everyone would chew gum on the sly. It was like our rebellious act.
Vaping is today's gum.
You're right.
I mean, I know it's closer to smoking, but it's just, I don't know. Remember there's Hubba Bubba,
Big League
these
Chew.
gums, Big League Chew. There's so many gum varieties, and now I feel like the money's not there, obviously.
They're all still around.
It's on to energy drinks.
It's on to energy drinks. Well, I'm sure our audience is wondering why the fuck are they talking about gum? Well, we're going to do a little forensic investigation today on the historical 1980s ad for Juicy Fruit gum, and that features snowboarding, and it's called "The Taste Is Gonna Move You." This commercial, or it was actually a series of commercials featuring a lot of different sports. It lives rent-free in the head of every child of the 80s. It's in our gray matter. It's picture, you got got a little bowl of Cheez-Its and you're sitting down to watch Magnum PI on Monday night and this comes on like, and it just definitely, this commercial embodies the 80s zeitgeist, you know, the hair, the clothes, the music, the David Hasselhoff, the attitude.
The Hoff.
It's all there.
Are you going to sing it?
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
If you're wondering, it goes, the taste is gonna move ya.
Yeah, Trish. Yeah.
But yeah, this commercial aired in the fall of 1987, the snowboarding version, and it starred Craig Kelly, Jim Zellers, Tom Burt, Terry Kidwell, Lori Gibbs, Bonnie Zellers, and Burt Lamar. And the action was shot by legendary ski filmmaker Greg Stump. This is the guy who basically put Glen Plake on the map. Glen Plake, you're thinking giant mohawk, zany pants, like cheetah pants, and just wildness of that 80s
Yeah,
time.
he really had a personal brand from the get-go.
He put the X in extreme, really.
Indeed. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Greg Stump is the filmmaker for this commercial, and he was making a bunch of other films at the time. Notably, he came out with in 87, The Blizzard of Oz, AAAHS.
The Blizzard of Oz came out in 88, actually.
Oh, sorry.
I think the Good, the Rad, and the Gnarly was 87, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so can we just list off a couple of his...
He's got great, like, pun,
the droids.
names.
Yeah, the best is like Time Waits for Snowman from 85.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Good Rad, the Gnarly is 87. Yeah, so Greg Stump is basically the guy documenting that emerging extreme ski movement that was coming out in the 80s. And Blizzard of Oz really landed. It hit the right time, right place. And it's one of those movies that the free ski community, it's like moved the needle for them.
Yeah. And we caught up with Greg, which was super fun to get to talk to him. And we also talked to Jim Zellers and Tom Burt. Jim and Tom are such icons of the sport. I feel like their names are a little bit under the radar for some,
Definitely.
but they had such a huge impact. They came up snowboarding in Tahoe together in the early 80s when snowboarding was brand new. It was a little baby. It still had morning dew on it. And these two went on to really pioneer big mountain snowboarding, like riding big lines in like Alaska and like kind of bringing a mountaineer's approach to it. And they blazed the trail for people like Craig Kelly, who is a contemporary of them, but really wasn't like delving into the backcountry as much at that time. And he that becomes his space that he owns. And like guys like Jeremy Jones, Big Mountain Jeremy Jones would eventually sort of follow those two in the backcountry as well. And I just wanted to say a note on sound quality. You know, we called Jim. Jim was driving from Tahoe to Montana to do some like epic backcountry mission for work. And Tom was on the north coast of France outside Biarritz, you know, surfing for the summer. So those two are obviously like out there living the life. And
it's cool they're still doing it, you know.
They're doing
like
it. And so
this lifestyle carried on.
Yeah. And so just all that is to say there's varying levels of sound quality on some of their audio, but we did want to sprinkle in their voices just because it's really awesome to hear from them. We don't get to hear from those guys that much.
What was your impression of Jim and Tom when you were coming up? Do you remember them in magazines? Like they felt so much older and like they were doing adult snowboarding. It's like they felt like this mature pioneer set of riders that were doing stuff that was so out of my like brain space of things that you would do on a snowboard. Like it didn't even
growing
connect
up in Stratton,
to me.
Vermont, you were like, because they're
like
doing
dropping cliffs and shit. Big ones.
I think your sort of summary of them is all true. You know, they're in their early 20s in 87 or whenever it was. You and I both started 88, 89. And so they're coming into their own and they are pioneering at that time. And they're writing shit neither of us had access to. Before we dig into the commercial, we wanted to, it's always fun to just sort of transport back to the time, get a little cultural context, what's going on, what's going down in 87 in the theater, Raising Arizona, Full Metal Jacket, The Princess Bride, The Lost Boys, Dirty Dancing. Holy shit. They all dropped that year. It was a banger year for movies, I think you could say. And somehow I was laughing with that entire lineup. What's on top at the box office? 3 Men and a Baby.
Hilarious. Which ones have stood the test of time? Princess Bride, Dirty, it's like
Exactly.
those, the 5 you mentioned were so much more memorable. 3 Women and a Baby, you're like, all right, awkward now.
Whatever. Awkward now. True.
And in terms of music in 1987, this is when Guns N' Roses released Appetite for Destruction.
That was big in my household.
Oh, yeah. Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer is pumping the airwaves. Whitesnake, Here I Go Again. Hair metal was having a moment. Yeah. Tiffany is out there. I Think We're Alone Now. That's for all the high school dances.
Teen and boppers.
Yeah, big hair, big personality. Hip hop was coming up. License to Ill came out in 86, but Fight for Right to Party and everything off License to Ill was still huge in 87 and still huge now, maybe. LL Cool J, Eric B, and Rakim were also out there that were kind of coming up, and other artists were pushing this hip hop scene and into the broader consciousness of music. And I wore my Prince t-shirt today because I felt like this is the only 87-ish, and this is even 84, I think, but
Purple Rain, man, respect.
Just Prince vibes, right?
Hell yeah. Politics, what's going on in the political vibes? Well, Ronald Reagan, an actor who turned into a president. Him and Gorbachev are meeting up and kind of comparing nuclear arsenal size. Like, whose is bigger? And the Black Monday stock market crash is about to happen. So this is going to happen on October 19th. Global markets tumble. The Dow Jones falling over 22% in a single day. That's actually the largest one-day percentage drop in history, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. This is being largely filmed in the spring of 87 and airing late summer, fall. So, moods are still high as John Bon Jovi's bangs, if you will.
So let's take a minute to describe the commercial. This is an explosion of basically everything 80s. It starts with this train of rad airtime. It's a whole crew of airs over some scrubby trees, one after the other, like boom, boom, boom. Woo, we're having fun out here. Some people are grabbing, some people aren't. There's headbands, there's the wraparound blades, ski sweaters, neon, some steezy methods. It's like this vibe of Yahoo, perhaps. And there's shots of random blonde girls looking very happy, putting sticks of juicy fruit in her mouth. And just this, their eyes are popping out. In all the commercials, the women's eyes are so big as they're bending this piece of gum into their mouth. They look slightly deranged on the freeze frames. But at the time, this is we're selling fun.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, everyone's happy. It's a group of friends hanging out, laughing. It features a young David Hasselhoff in aviator shades. You're like, whoa, is that Kit from Knight Rider?
Yes.
Or whatever his name is from Baywatch. There's tons of action. Craig is doing an alley-oop 540 type thing. Does he land it?
That
TBD.
One's a little, that's a bit of an unknown, yeah.
Terry Kidwell does a classic hand plant in his classic Terry Kidwell style, and they freeze frame on the last frame of Tom Burt doing a method and the tagline, "Juicy fruit, the taste is gonna move ya!" Exclamation mark.
Strap your snowboards on, grab a stick of juicy fruit. The taste is gonna move ya. Take a sniff, pull it out. The taste is gonna move ya when you pop it in your mouth. Juicy fruit is gonna move ya. It juices soft, it gets right to ya. Juicy fruit, the taste is gonna move ya.
I think it is worth talking about why we're talking about this commercial and why is it or is it important? And we were as we're diving into the sort of the background of this, people online are saying things like, pretty sure Juicy Fruit introduced me to snowboarding. So It's just during the 80s, and we've talked a bit about this before on the show, but snowboarding is really small in the 80s. This is essentially mid 80s and it's niche, and snowboarders can be numbered in the tens from mountain to mountain, and there's still a lot of mountains that you kind of can't even snowboard at yet. So it's not even a full-fledged movement. It's not even it's very much on the fringe. So To our reckoning, this was realistically only the second time that snowboarding had appeared on like this level in the mainstream, like on national TV screens. So being like piped into like every home throughout America on primetime TV, you know, this was a big deal.
In a positive light. Like in a positive light. Positive light. Like I feel like the other things you've seen, you know, like that 1985 newsreel where they're like, this stuff's crazy. They're wild. Kick them out. You don't belong. So it's like this positive energy of showcasing snowboarding.
Yes, that's a great point. And so the other, you know, sort of the only other one that is like kind of bubbling up at this time is in 1985, 2 years earlier, snowboarding is in James Bond, A View to a Kill. You know, it's the spy chase scene sequence. Tom Sims and Steve Link are stunt doubling for James Bond. And we went pretty deep behind the scenes on this one in our holiday snowboard history variety show last December. So if you want to find out a little bit more about that, dip into that episode. So moments like this, when a subculture kind of like pops its head up above like a meerkat kind of coming out of its hole and, you know, into the mainstream, they are a pretty big deal to drive like adoption into it, you know, so they're huge steps for growth in a culture. And it's funny, just the other night, we were watching that Vice series, Let It Kill You. They did one on Patrick O'Dell, who does Epically Later, that skate series. And he was saying, he was like, I started skating because I saw it in Back to the Future.
So many people.
Is in, you know, 1985 Robert Zemeckis movie starring Michael J. Fox. So it's a real thing. Like it kind of, you know, for me, it's like I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have access to culture. You know, you had what was accessible to you on
and on your 7 channels. Yeah.
With rabbit ears, and then going down to the grocery store, like what magazines were they carrying? They were carrying like car magazines and People magazine and shit like that. So this is a moment where, you know, kids in their houses were able to like see it and go like, ooh, holy shit, what is that?
I want a piece of that.
Yeah.
And some gum. They also, I was remembering when we were talking, there was a Labatt's Blue commercial for Labatt's beer that's featured snowboarding. It was filmed at Berthoud Pass. But
and
anyway,
when did that come out? Do we know?
In the 80s. I want to say 87 also, but Juicy Fruit like went mainstream, and I don't feel like Labatt's like no one I know
Canadian
saw
beer.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Other than Trent Bush.
Okay.
Yes. At X Games, I went to the shop. I went to X Games last week, and I went to the skate shop afterwards, and it felt like it was bustling at 11 a.m. And so it is sort of like you forget the impact of some of the, like a commercial when you're 8 or having X Games come to New Orleans. Like it just felt like there was a direct correlation to interest. I don't know. Maybe people were just lining up. The doors open at 8 a.m. to Humidity Skate Shop, but
they're like, is there AC in there? Let me in. And when you think about how big snowboarding got in the 90s, like how did those people that started snowboarding in the 90s like find out about it? These are some of the early ways that it's getting like planted into people's minds.
Yeah. So this commercial was a part of a whole series of commercials that ran from about the mid 80s through the 90s, all a part of the Juicy Fruit, the Taste is going to Move You ad campaign. The 1987 variant reuses like basically stock images of the gum-related experts, like these beachy models hanging out, having a good time and chewing gum. But it replaces all of this skiing stuff with snowboarding clips. And a little bit about the brand and the campaign. So during this time, Juicy Fruit Gum is focused on having more fun with sports. They had commercials involving, like, there's a water skiing one, volleyball, skiing, snowboarding. You said there's a boogie board one. I didn't find that one out there, but they dropped a mountain biking version in 1994. So actually pretty late after, when mountain biking was really still quite new to the scene. And it's interesting that they're focusing on these emerging and rebellious and counterculture sports, not like your parents' sports of tennis and golf and sort of country club sports that other people are into. So they're really trying to like latch on to that like surf, snowboard, ski, like party culture.
Rebellious kind of. It's really kind of insane when you think about, you look at the arc, like 1985, 1994, like this campaign is running for a decade.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is cool. Crazy. it was a decade of juicy fruit gum commercials coming at you. The music is super catchy. It's this earworm that they really hammered into the ground. And any child of the 80s can sing this whole thing. You hear like the first beat and you're like, yes.
Yeah.
For each new commercial, though, they just like swap out the sports. So like, jump on your boogie board, grab a stick of juicy fruit, or get your skis shined up. I'm like, oh, are we going to shine our skis?
Shine them,
get your board strapped on. Like,
yeah.
It's pretty funny and clever. The song is created by M2May, an American funk and soul group that rose to prominence during the early 1980s and had several R&B hits. And the founder was James M2May, who used to play with Miles Davis.
That's wild.
Yeah. It was cool. I did a like deep dive on jingles, which I can talk about later, but it was like the jingle culture was pretty fascinating and how they went from using jingle writers to then basically like the death of the jingle came with like Michael Jackson in 1984 when they started using pop artists and actual songs all the way to like Nick Drake's Pink Moon being used for
in the VW. Yeah.
A Volkswagen ad.
It was like a cabriolet ad. Yeah.
Yeah. So they just how like you'd hire someone to write a jingle and then by 84, which is, before this ad came out, it was starting to shift towards pop musicians, like using influencers' music, to sell the product and like put in like Michael Jackson singing about the Pepsi generation versus like a rhymey, song that has like a call to action and the name of the brand and
Yeah, that's interesting. Hot take. It does feel like the 80s was the golden age of gum branding. Like
$1,000,000%.
Doublemint Gum, Big Red, and Juicy Fruit, they're all owned by the William Wrigley Jr. Corporation. They had big budge and marketing firepower to like spend on some of the basically most memorable commercials of our era. Doublemint Gum had the Doublemint twins, these like cute blonde young twins that sort of wandered around. They had like a really cute dog that would like get away and then it would be found by like two equally handsome bronzed blonde men that would like come up and be like, oh, hey, do you need some help? They always needed help.
Yeah, of course. They're damsels in distress. But I was like, oh, why didn't they have twin men coming up to them?
Yeah, they didn't want it because that would get a little weird. Maybe.
Too much.
I don't know. But anyway, these twins were actually Katie Seagal from Married with Children. They were her sisters, her twin sisters, which is pretty interesting. I didn't know that. Big Red. That song, man. I think that song, the Big Red jingle, is more of an earworm maybe than Juicy Fruit. Oh my God. So kiss a little longer, hug a little longer with Big Red. Your fresh breath goes on and on. I mean, shit. I can't even say it without. I've actually had this in my head for like the entire time we were researching this.
So Big Red, did you rewatch that commercial for Big Red?
Yeah.
Did you see the kid from The Christmas Story is the guy playing the tuba in that? They show all these little different scenes of people like making out and being like, oh, it's the artist and his girlfriend are kissing. And then he creates a sculpture. They've been kissing so long with Big Red that he can make a full masterpiece. A different one. Yeah. And then it's like this tuba kid is kissing the cheerleader and the bus is leaving. And that commercial.
It's the kid from The Christmas Story?
Yeah, it's after. Wow. It's like 1983 was A Christmas Story, and the Big Red thing is 1985. And so I wasn't sure if it was like this intentional move to put like a Hasselhoff and Peter Billingsley and Katie Seagal twins, if they were putting these like cameo Easter egg appearances of celebrities in there intentionally, or they just needed the work and they had these guys come in.
I feel like the twins probably needed the work.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
Knight Rider was 82 to 86. So this is like prime time. When David Hasselhoff is in the Juicy Fruit commercial, it's prime Kit and Knight Rider time.
But he has just like a little cameo. It's pretty interesting.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Sidebar.
We've gone deep. Back to Juicy Fruits. Oh, I was just going to say Juicy Fruit was like the fun, active, rebellious one of the three. And so back to this ad, this taste is going to move you, these commercials that they made. We can make fun of these ads. It's hard not to because they're it's like full 80s cheeseball energy, but this is lifestyle marketing 101. Like they actually make the sports all look pretty fun, and it's a formula, like the structure of the commercials where like The crew pulls up to the spot. They pull out like the sporting equipment of whatever, sport they're about to do. And then they kind of get rad. And the footage of the actors like chewing the gum and doing all that type of stuff, that's shot totally separately. So it's a pretty, coming from someone who's like worked on TV commercials before, it's like a dream where you can be like, it's all nice and flexible. You can have this little container of footage that you like can cut in lots of different kinds of sports with.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like in that way, they did a pretty good job of like blending it together. And there's this feeling too of like the crew, like the friendship, or this feeling that like, it's this cool group of friends doing this cool thing that maybe you've seen before or maybe not. But if you just chew a little gum,
you're part of the gang, man.
You can be you can have friends that are cool
beautiful.
Like that. Speaking of beautiful, there is definitely some sexual undertones. There's a lot of chatter online about this. Just the lyrics like, take a sniff, pull it out. It's like there's talk of popping it in your mouth. Like it is really hard to ignore once you start thinking
once you see
in that way. Yeah, once you see it. And, someone said online, they were like, it was clear that everyone in this commercial was going to get laid after the skiing was over.
You're like, but we only learned that after taking our feminist studies class 101 in college, when they made it clear that every ad is
we had to get to the
ad.
90s to start thinking it that way. Yeah.
But yeah, Family Guy parodied the ski commercial. They had like a crash landing in the mountains or something. And the dad, Peter, is like, they found us. We're going to go back to base. And just as soon as we get some powder with these skiing young people. And it literally is like the commercial version of it. A Jeep rolls up packed with skiers. The jingle starts.
Yeah.
And they nailed it. It's got the same goofy, like super long. There's a woman with like a super long brimmed flower print hat, baseball hat in the commercial. And like there she is in the Family Guy thing, the jean short cutoffs and just like jamming with Peter. It's pretty epic. And obviously, I mean, Family Guy's going to nail it. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it right. But yeah, so want to dive into this production of this commercial. Again, this is filmed by Greg Stump. He's also shot footage for the second generation of the ski version that came out around this time. So the ski version starred his brother, Greg's brother, Jeff Stump, Eric Bertrand, world champion, French world champion, mogul skier. He was in the 1988 Olympics. Chris Hatch, who like I have known for years, and I had no idea he was in this. So I gave him a call. I'm like, give me the deets. What was it like?
What did he say?
He had some similar stories to kind of what Tom and Jim share later, so I'll just pipe in there with his. But he was just saying it was a game changer. It like changed his life, that like part of being in a commercial at the time, which you didn't realize until later. But he's a 1988 Olympic aerial skier, and he's stayed in the free ski world and works, with the U.S. team a bunch now in Park City. Scott Kennett was a pro mogul skier. He's in it. Lynn Wieland, and if you've watched Hot Dog the movie, she is Banana Pants in the 1984 movie. So
recurring theme on going off. Hot Dog the movie.
Hot Dog keeps coming back. Anyway, but the point is that these are all rippers. They're mogul skiers, aerial skiers. They're like the cream of the crop at that time.
To be clear, so there was a 1985 ski version. The skiing action in this is a bit more like traditional skiing, I would say. And they're kind of like, airing off shit and like some moguls and stuff like that. The 87 version, or I'm thinking it's around the same time as the snowboard version. I think he shot them both, is a bit more like I'm showcasing the extreme ski movement.
So here's the deal with that. So Hatch was on the 87 snowboard version. He was there as a stunt coordinator for the snowboard commercial. And I'm like, okay, but you were in the ski commercial. He's like, yeah, but basically what Greg did is he took already the footage he had because they were filming all of Greg Stump's movies and sliced it in there. So they never had like a photo shoot for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so he just had stuff, but then he had to go shoot the snowboarding because
he didn't have snowboarding in that way. Yeah. So there were a couple versions, an 84, 85 version, and then there's a version came out in 80, 88, 89 of the ski version.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So
fumbled through it, girl. Fumbled through it. You got it.
Clear as mud. Who is Greg? Greg motherfucking Stump. You could argue that Greg is one of the most influential filmmakers of like quote unquote our world, as in like snowboarding and skiing, essentially, because he sort of redefined the ski film for a new generation. Like his movies are like, they are this sort of late 80s new action excitement around sort of quote unquote extreme skiing. So he was there on scene in Tahoe. He came up in Tahoe, so he's capturing this crew of skiers that are like going into the backcountry, and they're, you know, guys like Glenn Blake and Scott Schmidt, you know. And as you mentioned, his 1988 film, The Blizzard of Oz, it broke huge worldwide.
Yeah.
Like it was a genuine pop culture crossover success. So it didn't just get really popular in the ski world. Like it broke into, you know, the mainstream, and people were like, whoa, did you see that movie? Glenn Blake and Scott Schmidt got invited on the Today Show, and you can see it online. It's pretty funny, the interview. Glenn Blake obviously has the mohawk up, and he's also wearing like the American flag printed 3-piece suit that later another Tahoe local, Sean Palmer, would adopt and kind of make famous and make part of his sort of look in personal brand. So Greg, yeah, he's bringing this new energy, and he's sort of setting the tone for like what ski films can become. And, you know, like production companies in snowboarding, like Fall Line Films, they would follow that model. We talked to Dave Cioni, and, you know, kind of went behind the scenes on Roadkill. And he was saying, he was like, yeah, we were looking at what Greg Stump was doing with those movies and going like, okay, there's a model that is rad and we want to follow. So we can mention too, in the late 80s, skiing starts to sort of plateau. It kind of has this like little dip of popularity, and, you know, snowboarding is getting popular and things like that. And, you know, according to Greg, he was like, skiing never died for us because we were out there making these movies, and our energy was actually like an emerging energy. And so he was saying people give us credit for resurrecting skiing as cool in many ways, like pre Greg Stump, you know, making these films and that movement. It's a lot of like synchronized skiing. You know, it's a vibe shift. It's another vibe shift.
Yeah, the sport itself. And then also, you know, like Dick Barrymore and Warren Miller were doing ski films. Yeah. But what Greg did, which is what Hatch said, is like he made ski films for the MTV era. And so he kind of like cracked that code on it, instead of these sit at home with your family where you're watching and like, oh, chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. And like he turned skiing into this MTV and like song for each part, and kind of that formula that was emerging in the world at that time too.
Yeah, that's a great point. The music in he's known for like the soundtracks in his films and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the way that he narrates his films, they're like, I mean, Warren Miller's got some humor in it too, but it just felt more of the time. He was more peer, instead of like Warren Miller's like sitting back on his couch talking about skiing to like the younger generation, or kind of this like wise elder statesman or something.
Yeah, this gang has an edge. Like even now, Greg is, it is, you gotta love it. Love and respect. Yeah.
Google some interviews with him and you'll see him on ours. But just, I watched a couple yesterday.
He's a character. I love him.
Zany and awesome. Yeah. So anyway, in 1987, Greg is shooting for his next ski film, The Good, the Rad, and the Gnarly. But Greg is also hip to like this up and coming snowboarding movement. He said he was a total believer in its power and what was like going to become, what snowboarding was going to become. So he was already shooting a lot of snowboarding too at that time, mainly through this connection he had with Swatch watches. In that Juicy Fruit commercial, I remember seeing like there's like a Swatch sweatshirt on one of the skiers. I'm like, oh, Swatch was so big and prevalent in all of the like freestyle skiing and snowboarding in the early days.
And they were all about rebellious sports. Like they honed in on that as their thing.
And,
like they sponsored skateboarders and
and just like you could have 5 Swatch watches and like all the colors. It was full 80s gear. So they were like a big sponsor of snowboarding back in the early days, and, you know, other Extreme with an X sports during that time. You know, they sponsored the first few Breckenridge World Championships. Greg's friend was marketing director Steve Reckshoffner, and according to Greg, Steve was the third employee at Swatch, and Greg knew him from ballet skiing because Greg was a ballet a sponsored ballet skier. Can we
You
just
said they were
sit on that
both.
for a hot second?
They
but
were
yeah,
both.
but like,
yeah.
like,
That's
for anybody who doesn't
1980s,
know
baby.
ballet skiing, it's basically really long poles, really short skis, and you're like flipping and spinning around your poles on like basically flat, below green level terrain and kind of doing an artistic expression of ski pole dancing.
Yeah, like flat ground BMX or something.
Yeah, it was a big thing, and it was a part of the sport, and it was a part of like the World Cup. I think it was working its way towards the Olympics. I don't think it ever made there. But anyway, so they were sponsored ballet skiers, working with Steve, Greg, first shot skateboarding, like Tony Hawk and Lance Mountain, and that kind of crew, that era, and then eventually moved on to snowboarding, and then obviously he went on to film skiing. So Greg's films did a lot to expose the world to snowboarding during the late 80s to give it a platform. He used snowboarding in his movie The Maltese Flamingo that dropped in the fall of 1986, and then also that like featured some of that very first World Championships in Breckenridge, where it was like a real, we've talked about this event quite a bit, but it's kind of like the big moment for snowboarding like coming to life.
Yeah, and Swatch hires Greg because his buddy's the marketing director.
Yeah.
So they hire Greg to shoot all of those Breckenridge Worlds, or those very first Breckenridge Worlds. So that's why Greg is even there. So yeah. Now, according to Greg, the Juicy Fruit advertising, this campaign, this whole 10-year-long campaign, was being led by a big-time ad agency called BBDO. They're headquartered in New York, but they have offices all over. They've been around since 1981. Super old and respected.
1891.
Sorry. They've been around since 1891.
They were getting hip to snowboarding and skiing. And my business partner at the time got a call from BBDO, and Wrigley's wants you to shoot some, just all they need is action. And they had all the cutouts of all the people that weren't the snowboarders and weren't the skiers. I just shot the action. We shot it all in like the afternoon.
So that was the brief. Rad action. No storyboards or anything. Just like go out, shoot some cool shit. So Greg shot it, and then BBDO did the edit. So kind of whoever made it into the spot, it was on the agency. Like Greg didn't edit it. He was clear about that. So let's talk about the day of the shoot. Behind the camera is Greg, obviously, and then his shooting partner, Bruce Benedict. The shoot goes down the day after the 1987 Breckenridge World Championships. So this is the second World Championships ever. Greg's memory is that the agency didn't choose the riders either. They sort of just were like, hey, we need some rad footage. And so it was more like the energy of like Greg going, hey, I'm going out shooting. Who wants to come? And so, who trails along after him? Oh, just only the best snowboarders in the world. Craig
But
Kelly.
do you feel like he was like, yo, Craig, come with me. You're the guy? Or it really was just whoever
That's
was
what
in
he said.
Yeah.
It was more like, hey, I'm going out shooting. Who wants to come? That's directly from Greg.
Yeah.
So,
and then Craig's so like smart and savvy. Like, of course, he'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to take that. This is an opportunity to.
It's an opportunity. And, as we'll get into later, it was a little bit on the pretense of just shooting for Greg's movie as well. So again, the gang is Craig Kelly, Jim Zellers, Tom Burt, Lori Gibbs, Bonnie Zellers, Burt Lamar, Terry Kidwell. He does have 2 clips in the commercial, but they were the only clips not shot on location at Breckenridge. These were actually licensed later from Sims and clips shot in Tahoe for the Sims movie that came out that year. So there's one shot of him strapping in, and that was like a functional need. Like you could see the creative director sitting down and looking at the footage and going like, well,
and
the lyrics say strap your board on, grab a stick of juicy fruit. We need a shot of someone strapping in to really like say the whole thing. And so they licensed that shot. They also got another shot of Terry's famous, very aesthetically pleasing hand plant. One of those. It looks like it's the Donner QP. I want to say this is probably definitely in the Sims movie as well. So let's talk a little bit about the vibe around the world. You mentioned it earlier, and we've talked quite a bit about it on here, but these Breckenridge World Championships events were huge cultural meeting grounds.
Yeah.
They weren't just competitions. There wasn't very many competitions throughout the year, and this one was like the biggest one at the end of the year. It's kind of like a finale in a way. And Jim Zellers was saying, look, I'm not Craig Kelly. I'm not Sean Palmer. Like, we knew we weren't going to win, essentially. If you're not those two people, you're not going to win. But he was like, we were there to hang, you know? It was really fun getting to ride the pipe the day after. Like, that was the best part. And just, there was no good pipes is sort of what he was saying. So it was just an opportunity to, like, be in the mix and also get to ride something that was very rare and coveted, you know?
And, like, at that time, there's 10 people at your local resort that snowboard. So you want to go to the melting pot, the meeting spot that everyone's going to come into and meet the other people that are super obsessed with this new thing and, you know, open those channels of like homies.
Hell yeah. This 1987 Worlds, this session that went down in the halfpipe the day after, it was a pretty big session because isn't this the one where
Chris Pappas did the first inverted Chris Pappas barrel roll?
And it's, the first documented in a magazine.
My bad.
Documented in a magazine. Now that was Transworld?
ISM.
Documented in the pages of ISM. So yeah, barrel roll, but essentially inverted
beginning of our invert
AKA
conversation. Yeah.
McTwist, which we covered in our History of Inverts episode over the summer. He also has a memory, Jim has a memory of like the kind of shit that would go down at the halfpipe. Like, you know, again, you mentioned MTV. MTV was there, like the crew was there at this 87 halfpipe. And he was like, they brought the band Deep Purple out to the pipe and like put a couch down and they were sitting on the side of the pipe with like their bell bottoms and just weird shit like that. Deep Purple, for those who don't know, is like a late 60s, early 70s kind of psychedelic rock band. They're famous for Smoke on the Water.
It's the first song you learn on guitar because it's super easy to play.
So anyway, they're sitting on, so just that kind of like, just, you know, random ass crossover shit's going down on the side of the pipe.
It's funny that I watched that MTV show from that event, and it's like you can't even tell they're at the snowboarding event. It's like, it's just a video countdown. So they're like, okay, and up next, number 10.
And snow's in the background.
Yeah, and like there's like maybe one person airing. I was like looking for cool content and, you know, cool action. And it's just a lot of like, we're here on the side of the pipe.
Who's the VJ?
Number 9. It was nobody that I ever saw or remembered.
Yeah. Okay,
but I'm like, that's cool. They flew them out to do like side just hits
on location. Yeah, that is cool. So word on the street is that they shot for about a half a day for the commercial. When I was talking to Tom Burt, I was curious. I wanted to know, did the riders know what they were getting into? Like, this spot became so huge. Like we've said, it's piped into every household, primetime TV. Like, did they have any sense of the creative or anything like that?
We ended up hooking up with Greg Stump, who was there, you know, filming some snowboarding stuff. Somehow he had the connection that they wanted to film the possibility of a Juicy Fruit commercial on spec. So in the world of, you know, Hollywood, that means they're going to shoot it in hopes to be paid later. But at the same time, he if it didn't turn out, the commercial didn't happen, he still, you know, we still were giving him the option to use the footage for like his movie stuff. So for us, as far as, you know, professional athletes at that time, which, you know, we weren't really making any money, but, you know, we were considered professional athletes. Part of our job was to do promotions, right, for our companies and for snowboarding in general, because at that time it was just growing. So, you know, he had gotten that, you know, like, hey, if you shoot it and we like it, we'll make it. That was the understanding, at least, that I had. So we hooked up on a day after the competition or whatever it was. You know, we had the time and we went and filmed the shots. You know, and there were just a flurry of different shots that we were trying to shoot. So we spent a day basically shooting the shot list that Greg had in mind.
It's interesting that Jim said, like, Tom knew that they were shooting for this, but Jim said he didn't really know that it was for Juicy Fruit. And he was kind of like, okay, we're just going to go out and shoot.
We're just shooting. We're just going out there shooting.
And he kind of knew who Greg Stump was, you know, by his reputation. But he was kind of like, Greg's like, hey, do you want to put on this Club A outerwear and I'll film you guys? But didn't know it was for a commercial and didn't think too much about it.
Yeah.
And just a little side tangent about Club A. This is an outerwear brand from Lapland up in Sweden. It's super colorful, really bright, poppy color blocking. It had like a pop of colors on one leg. And they had these like 3 interlocking lowercase A's as their big branding as a band across the leg. And anyone who was skiing around that time would recognize it.
I totally remember like skiers wearing this shit. Like the one piece
vibe.
is tons of yellow, and then that like logo, the A logo on the leg.
3 A's. Yeah. It was like peachy. Like the peachy color was very reminiscent in my mind, but
yeah.
This is also a huge, like everybody in the Blizzard of Oz is wearing it.
Well, because they started the movie.
Yeah, the movie. And then that, I mean, I've read that article in Snowwalker was saying like that basically like launched their brand. But then, of course, you know, they didn't take into account that it'd be so big in the US, but then there's like tariffs and all this stuff. But it like that, again, like the power of that Blizzard of Oz movie and how it put so many things on the map, like brands, athletes, and just skiing in a new way. And Craig and Burt Lamar were in there wearing their famous white Sims super tight tights. We think this was a Sims uniform during that time. I mean, Tom Sims is sort of known for like tight white pants in the era, so they probably did have maybe a clothing deal in their contract. But Tom and Jim didn't have a clothing sponsor, and so they were sponsored by Avalanche, which didn't have a clothing line, so they were wearing the Club A stuff.
Yeah, they were kind of like on a different tier than Greg and Burt. So they were like, "Oh, you want me to wear that? Yes,
I'm down.
Yes, I'm down. I'm down." So
also, like at that time, they would do like snowboard, like fashion pieces in snowboard magazines. Like in this ISM from 1990, they have like all different athletes of the time, like sponsored riders wearing like a North Face kit and all this.
Oh, like a lookbook. Yeah,
like
it's interesting.
Yeah. There you're like, oh, it's Evelyn Vilmuth and she rides for Sims and I've seen her in a Sims one-piece jumpsuit, but now she's in North Face and over here she's in an OP and Gotcha. Like it was,
I wonder what
I don't know, maybe it's just a different
those.
time. Or again, they were like a different tier of athlete.
Yeah, where they weren't getting paid to exclusively ride. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Anyway, Chom and Jim are young. Like they're in their early 20s, as we mentioned. They just graduated college. They'd gone to college in Reno together and kind of came up riding. And they're obsessed with snowboarding. They're trying to make it as pros. They have no money. You know, they're like scraping by. And Jim said he was reminiscing back to that event, that Breck Worlds, and he was like, "Yeah, we all slept on Steve Link's floor." Like 10 of us at his place up in Frisco. So they're on the dirtbag train. Awesome. And of course they're down to shoot, whether it's on spec or just to shoot. Like they knew that it was part of their thing. They wanted to be pro snowboarders. So yeah, they're going to definitely go out and shoot. So yeah, here's Jim's memory of the shoot.
You know, we were doing all this filming. I remember hiking above the half pipe. He goes, "Hey guys, just come down and make turns." So when we all hiked up, we came down and looked up and we watched Craig come down. That was sort of the ultimate turning point for a lot of people of like, holy crap, can that guy turn? Greg Stump just sort of like changed his whole view of snowboarding, you know, watching Craig. And that got into the film, that little turning segment, just coming, I mean, you know, whatever, 20-degree little slope above us, it's just so stylish.
I asked Greg if I was a little curious. I was like, hey, were there any hijinks during the shoot? I was just wondering about personalities and stuff. And he was like, off the mountain, nothing but hijinks. But he said, no, all those athletes were serious, though. They wanted to do a good job. The vibe was like, we want to do our best, which is cool. They were all professional, essentially.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Tricia, let's talk about the bag of money. How big was the bag of money? You've got some broke-ass snowboarders who may or may not be aware that they're shooting one of the most memorable commercials of all time for a large gum corporation. How much did they make? That was the main thing we wanted to know. Yeah. The answer was they actually made a shitload. Here's Jim.
I remember at the end of that season, I worked all summer, and then my wife Bonnie and I took this 3-month road trip. And I came home to no job, very little snowboard money, and no money in the bank. And I checked my mail after 3 months being away, and there was a check for like, I don't know, $5,000.
So what happened was, because this is a legit Hollywood-style commercial, they got retroactively inducted into the Screen Actors Guild. This is SAG. So this is through a legal provision called the Federal Taft-Hartley Act, and this allows non-union actors to be hired on to the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA. So you do a shoot, and then they're like, okay, cool, we're going to actually use you. We're going to get you into SAG. So this meant that they got retroactively a day rate for the shoot, plus residuals every time the commercial aired. So they kept getting checks. This aired for like many years, and they also got 2 years of health insurance out of it.
It aired for 2 years.
It aired for 2 years. Okay, so it's interesting. When I was talking to Hatch, I guess the ski one aired for 3 years, and so he's cool. The first year.
Yeah, those just made some dough.
Yeah, he's like, the first year it ran on like the mainstream networks, and it ran like, on the main 3, not that many times, but they got like a $10,000 check. And then the next year it ran on like the level 2 stations, but it ran more times, and then he got about a $10,000 check. And then the third year it ran on like low budget shit, but was on a zillion times, and then he got a $10,000 check. So he's like, Beautiful. It's just interesting, kind of the level of payout. And you're on ABC, NBC, you're like making bank, but you might only get, 5 runs of the commercial. But then 3 years later, they're like, put it everywhere, and you get like less of a rate, but more reps. So
yeah, Eric Berton, I guess he saw Greg at some event like after, and he was like, Greg, I have to thank you. I need to buy you dinner or something, because he's like, I made all this money. Anyway, Greg told me that story.
But so through SAG-AFTRA, they also got health insurance. So these guys go from being, like you're saying, dirtbag, college, like scraping by, to having 2 years of health insurance, which when you're trying to be an up-and-coming pro snowboarder in the 80s, that's huge. And so, Tom Burt was saying that they kept getting checks for 2 years because the commercial was so popular that it got re-upped for another year. And that was pretty rare for like a big Hollywood-style commercial to get re-aired like that.
So they did a 6-week block in the fall of 87. And then they did another 6-week block in the fall of 88. So we made basically 12 grand twice. So we made 24 grand off the commercial, which was huge money for us because, at that time we weren't making shit from our sponsors. So that's what allowed, it basically allowed me to be, okay, I got some money in the bank, maybe I can make it as an athlete,
So Craig Kelly was already making money, but this is a huge deal for a couple of these younger riders in their dirtbag prime. And both Jim and Tom said this was a pretty big turning point for them, that getting money like that was like, kind of, wheels are turning, like, like this snowboarding thing could turn out to be something. So Jim was saying, what that did for Tom and I, it launched us into saying, I guess we're pro snowboarders now. And not only did it do that, but Tom was talking about how it sparked a larger interest with the two of them doing commercial shoots.
I mean, for Jim and I, we instantly learned the power of marketing and the marketing dollar. No one ever educates anybody about it, which kind of sucks. That there's so much money that's put out in marketing. You're like, holy, you don't know, because no one ever tells you, and you don't realize your value. But that was the best thing. The commercial was the best thing that ever happened as far as education, like for me, because it showed me that I had value and not to give away my value. So from that commercial on, like I never signed my rights away to filmers or photographers, like complete rights, unless they were paying me outright, to do that, to sign them away. Otherwise, I'd give them the right to use, like if we were shooting for something, say Standard Films as an example, for like the TV series, I gave them the right to use it for the TV series, but anything beyond that, I needed to be contacted and okayed with if they sold any of the footage, right? Like stock footage. And that turned out to be like a super powerful thing.
Tom was telling stories about how they actually got an LA agent because they were thinking like, dude, let's do this
That's
more.
Amazing,
We want to pursue this, like star in movies that require the talents of someone who knows how to do some of these sports. So he was saying like, we were good at windsurfing, we could rock climb, we could skate, we could
like,
snowboard.
I'll do anything.
So they had this sort of roster of like, sports
skills
that they could do, of skills that they had that were not that common in Hollywood. So they got an LA agent, and the agent got them this audition. They went down to LA to audition for the role of quote unquote skateboarder. Tom was like, it was full, like the room was just full of posers. Basically, it was just a bunch of actors who said they could skate and had the look that the casting director wanted. So they were like so turned off by it and bummed out by it. And he was like, we never did it again. We called our agent and told him like, look, like here's the sports we can do. If you have something for us, call us. But we're not doing that again. Like it just doesn't feel authentic. It's that shit's whack was the general energy.
Yeah, and like fortunately that actually happened to them because they would have missed out on a ton of epic shit that like turned out to be their snowboarding careers, if you're like constantly getting pulled off for that. But okay, what about Greg? So the shooter behind all of this, how much did he make? Yeah. So for shooters, sadly, SAG-AFTRA for the camera guy, there is none. There's no insurance. There's no, residuals on commercial runs. So he sold the footage for like $2,500. He also got $2,500 for the ski footage. So $5,000 in total. Not a bad payday because in '87, that's quite a lot more money than $2,500 now. But it's not the life-changing amount that these SAG-AFTRA actors got.
Yeah. And that's common and as it should be, Greg was sort of like, yeah, that's how it is.
I will say I did like 3 commercials in my snowboarding career. I did like a Bud Light commercial and a Chevy trucks commercial and something else for the Olympic team. And
do tell.
It is funny. Like, well, the Bud Light commercial, we had like a skit, a whole thing. And then I have a copy of it. It didn't air, but we got paid for the day, right? But then the Chevy commercial, it's like I didn't really even know that I was in it. But then I just started getting checks for like.
So they licensed footage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. And then the other ones I did were like PSAs basically, so you didn't get any money, but it was cool for a while. You're like, oh, cool. Here's a $5,000 check from something I didn't even know you were in.
Amazing. Thank you very much, corporation. All right. Well, looking back on the commercial now, I think anything coming out in the 80s is kind of gonna be a wash in this glassy airbrush, feathered hair, day-glow kind of vibe. That was the exuberance of the day. But if you sort of pull that curtain aside and you look at the action, it was on point. Terry's hand plant, Craig's turns, Tom's method that they freeze framed on at the end. Like this stuff was all cool. And it catalogs the time, in an important way of essentially like what the riding, where the riding was in the arc of progression. It's really cool for people to be able to look at it, like go back and look at it and be able to see the way things were. Because in 87, this is almost 40 years ago, like things were really different than they are now. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it was a whole other country essentially. So I don't know, Trish, how do we feel like, how do you feel the legacy of the Juicy Fruit commercial has held up? Or has it?
I mean, I think it's amazing. It's like a time capsule of the time. Yes, is it over the top and cheesy? But that's what commercials were in the 80s. It wasn't this standout, wacky, zany thing. And also fluorescent and tight pants and like the vibe that they captured was the vibe we were going for in 87.
And like it created a really like a sense of fun and energy. Like I do think as sort of commercially as it is, they did a good job of making it look fun and feel like a world you wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
They didn't make it look whack,
No, it's like spring snowboarding at its finest, with friends, it's sunny out, you're like launching off stuff, it's slushy, it's slashy, like like we wanted to be a part of it. And I do think that there's so many people's careers that it probably kickstarted from that and then, like spiraled out, like the ripple effect of just seeing it and being like, oh, that's cool. I want to see it. And then all of a sudden you're starting to see it at your ski resort and you try it and you open up into that. Like, and now it's like so amazing. It's not some like we were talking before we got on the podcast about watching some old movies, like there's nothing cringy. I mean, there's some cringy stuff in it, but there's nothing where you're like, ooh, that is canceled.
Yeah.
Like it still is feel good,
yeah.
fun, yummy, like people in their prime doing rad shit. So we've asked both Jim and Tom when they saw the commercial, what did they think? They were both like, I thought it was pretty good, at the time.
Yeah.
And Jim was like, yeah, it was a good representation of snowboarding during the time. Craig spinning, the jump train. And then Tom was like, yeah, well, there's always things that could have been better, but they didn't butcher it,
Yeah.
Like they felt like content with the work. And then Greg had kind of a different perspective. He's like, I never met anyone who thought it was anything but a joke. This is more about the non-rider content, part of that commercial, the song. This is all an assumption, but it's got that corny vibe to it. Jim did say that the actors were totally goofy, which
I think that's what
like
Greg is reacting to. Like he said that, and I was listening back to him saying that, and I was like, it is not meant to be a diss on the writing at all. Which I think he believed the writing was good, but I do think that there is a jokiness about it. There was cool things going on in the 80s.
Yeah.
There was like new wave and the hip hop culture's emerging and graffiti. And there's there's cool things going on. This was not that. Like this package snowboarding up in a mainstream package. So, it didn't necessarily have the edgy underground energy that we like to pride snowboarding as encapsulating. However, the writing was true. And were they exploiting snowboarding? They were marketing their product in association with a cool sport. That's not rocket science. It's been done a million times before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that they got paid. I feel like there's so many other ways that snowboarding's been exploited without any real core athletes or artists or filmmakers making money on it.
Yeah, so this isn't, to your point, this was actually an instance that they hired a core filmer, one of the best filmers in the game, to hire the best snowboarders in the world and gave them good compensation. That's a win-win on some level. So you have to look at it as a success for our culture, not just, the mainstream kind of aspect of it. And we have to remember, you and I were talking, this is pre-1990s. So, in the 90s, every snowboarder had to become very protective of how they were perceived in outside culture in terms of how snowboarding is perceived in the outside world, because they had to be. We had to be. The 90s was a feeding frenzy, That was the time in our history when corporate America was trying to make money off our fucking subculture and all subcultures. That's, that was what the 90s was about. It's what informed every Gen X's aversion to selling out, which is now a cliche and is laughable because now
everyone's a sellout.
Every young person's like, hey, this is my morning routine. Use code blah, blah, blah for my vitamins or whatever. Yeah. So it was a different time and we were forged in that fire, but the 80s was sort of before that.
Yeah.
And,
and it was about getting the word out too in that way. There's always this balance of how do you grow the thing that you love in a way that you feel like it should grow? And mainstream grows the thing that you love, putting it on Juicy Fruit or the Olympics or X Games. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we lost ownership over it. Yeah,
or it's not on our terms.
Yeah. So
whereas
sure
this felt it was on our terms in a way, or there was things about it that were on our terms.
That were
how's the action portrayed? Who's in it? Are they getting paid?
Right. Yeah. There's not a room full of people going okay, we need 10 skateboarders. Okay, you look like a skateboarder in my mind, which is what they were kind of hitting when they went to Hollywood. It is pretty rare and cool that they brought Greg in and he had the core chops to bring in the right guys.
Yeah.
Or just fate makes shit happen. And girls, Lori Gibbs.
Beautiful.
And Bonnie Zeller.
Yeah.
Yeah. In hindsight, it's Tom was kind of saying that these days it's always fun to go back in that time and see what was happening. And he thinks it's hilarious that he got the last freeze frame in the commercial. Again, just how
he got the last
out.
Word.
He got the taste is going to move you word.
Yeah.
And again, the power of these moments when snowboarding showed up on national TV and then kids all over this country saw it. And a lot of those ones that would reject the mainstream probably came into it through the Juicy Fruits and the James Bond and all of those mainstream moments.
The irony, Tricia, the irony.
The irony.
It's important to remember, though, as much as we've talked about the importance and, what it did for the riders, it wasn't the heart of the sport, you know? And at the end of the day, Jim was kind of saying this too. He was sort of like, it was cool. We made some money and then we moved on. Like 87, we're on the verge and snowboarding is changing and it's going to grow and all these beautiful little niches are going to spiral out of it. So yeah, what are we going to do next?
I mean, I guess looking back on it, the Juicy Fruit thing was kind of a little peripheral. Like it was off to the side for us as much as what the next thing we were going to do was. And there was sort of and at this stage, maybe an embarrassing amount of obsession that I had with snowboarding and probably Tom. And we just blew up a lot of stuff to just continuously snowboard and really we didn't think about anything else unless it was rock climbing season or something. So I think back on that as, Juicy Fruit happened. However, it was just snowboarding to us. And we weren't really, I guess, a good way to view it was when you go, you're going to go ride the trees. You're going to go ride powder through the trees. The number one rule is don't look at the trees. They're distractions and they're in your way, right?
Yeah.
You look at the gaps. And we just saw everybody who was going to discourage us about this skiboarding that turned into snowboarding, and the resorts that didn't allow us. They were just the trees. And we just looked past everything and looked at the gaps and just saw like potential all the time of what to do next. And Juicy Fruit was just a part of it.